Good afternoon, everyone. The Ranter is back to go into yet another diatribe of the news of the day, rambling and all that. The last one I did was a pre-election rant. This is now the post-election rant. However, it wasn't exactly the one I was wanting to do. Though still the same themes is there. As of a few days ago, after a agonizing for some long wait and long count of certain states, Joe Biden has won the election. He has 279 electoral college votes, which is still going to be counting because Arizona is still out and Georgia is still out. And he is currently at 76 million votes in the majority over Donald Trump, who has 71 million. So we have a nice 4 and change to 5 million vote gap. And one of the things that we were expecting to happen was that Donald Trump was not going to concede. Well, most of us kind of knew that was happening, and Donald Trump also cried fraud, which we also knew was going to happen. We're going to go into this whole election fraud thing here. And as the old saying goes, that really ancient saying that we all know, we're going to untangle this web of shit. So, let's do a brief think back on the start of this campaign, when it was going to be down to Biden and Trump. Months ago, Trump says, if I don't win, they cheated. Weeks ago, if I don't win, they cheated. Days before the election, if I'm not the winner, then they've cheated. Day of the election, when Trump declared himself victory, without being anywhere near the 270 electoral college votes and having his population vote still be smaller than Joe Biden's population vote, he still declared that if he didn't win this outright, it's fraud. And so now we're here at days after he didn't win, so obviously it must be election fraud. We saw over this period of time a delay in the vote counting from certain states. Long spans of time that we were all watching. And I know some people's memories isn't all that long term, but we were warned this was going to happen. On social media, Joe Biden's camp sent out word warning the people on social media, on his supporters, that don't believe the polls. This is going to be closer than what the media is telling you. You'll see all these polls going off in these various states of how Biden was ahead in all these places, and sometimes ahead significantly. Well, don't believe it. Still vote. And also remember that the mail-in vote is going to come in later than the same-day election vote comes in, because there was 100 million people that did early voting and mail-in voting. That's going to take a lot. That's going to take a lot of time to do that, right? So the same day vote happens, which was mostly Trump-heavy supporters who didn't do the mail-in voting, whatever. So they went in and they voted good. They voted good for him, all justly, all righteously. Those are all good votes for Donald Trump. All right. People also voted for Biden, obviously. And my hat is just sort of, after a while, I'm just going to toss it. Anyway. Then you got the mail-in vote that we had suspected was going to be overwhelmingly for Biden. Now, here's the thing about this. This is the largest turnout, voting, mail-in voting, early voting, ever. So it is going to take time to vote for this all. Even when we already have a winner with Joe Biden at 279 electoral college votes, we still got three states out? 4 states, actually. You had North Carolina, Georgia, Alaska, and Arizona. They're still out, but because the vote is still taking some time to get completely tabulated. So when things started to turn, as we were suspecting, with the mail-in votes and the early votes, blah blah blah, was going towards Biden, that's when we started hearing more profoundly the cries of fraud. And we had to stop the vote. You had to stop the vote. You had to stop the vote in Pennsylvania. But then, no, keep counting the vote in Arizona. Well, they're already counting the vote, but let's protest like that anyway. And then it's called 279, at the time, 75 million population majority. Joe Biden is president-elect. Kamala Harris is vice president-elect. Trump doesn't concede. There is no call. Did you really expect him to? Because I didn't. You know, and in reality, concession really isn't an integral part of all this. Yeah, it's good to concede for the sake of the country, to try to bring everybody together after a election loss. Some people develop character that people didn't even realize they had through their concession speeches. People will make themselves legendary because of their concession speeches. And then they become the national names for their parties, and they become venerated because of how eloquent they can be and how they will graciously congratulate the winner, etc., etc. But were you really expecting Donald Trump to do that? He doesn't care about the country. He has proven that time and time again. He doesn't even care about his own supporters. You know, in the last few weeks, we've heard about his supporters getting abandoned in Omaha, or outside of the rally outside of Omaha, where they bust them in there for it, then they kind of left them there. I don't know what communication snafu was that you just sent out people 3 miles away from the major road, where people had to go on a hike to get to somebody, to get to them, where we had elderly folk and those who were out in the cold and exposure needing ambulances. Same thing happened in a rally in Florida, where it was like, instead of a cold, it was heat, and people were having heat stroke. And another event, which again they got abandoned. You know, you can make the claim that in politics, the politicians don't really care about their supporters. I mean, they're throwing the same accusation to Joe Biden. Joe Biden hasn't left anybody, like, hanging at a rally. But be that as it may, this is a little bit different. This is almost like he is explicitly telling you he doesn't care about you. Hell, he did say it specifically. Again, weeks before the election, when he was in Erie, Pennsylvania, you know, if he didn't, he basically made it clear. If he didn't really need Pennsylvania, do you think he would be in Erie? He said it himself to all those Erie folk in Pennsylvania. So you got now this election fraud. Election fraud, yeah. Every case that they put together, from the campaign to trying to stop the mail-in vote, to try to stop drop boxes, to try to eliminate drop boxes so mail-in votes could not go through properly, all of that was a dog. All of that was dismissed, thrown out. So far, we're getting all these threats of court cases now, where we get attorney generals of these states, secretary of states of these states, governors of these states, some of them Republican, I might add, who found no merit to these claims because there is no evidence of these claims. So these things get thrown out, or these things get trashed. The LG governor in Georgia says that he finds no evidence of there being fraud. The two senators of Georgia want him to resign. These two senators, incidentally, are in runoffs because they didn't crest over that 50% mark. So there's an automatic recall and runoff of their votes. So the Democrats might actually pick it up, or might not. But nonetheless, since this guy didn't say that there was fraud, he needs to resign. What country are we living in now? We can't, automatically 100% follow dear leader, and so therefore they must be destroyed? Oh yeah, he gave you the eloquent fuck you to the idea of resigning because he didn't see any fraud. For me, this is an interesting needle to thread, okay? Because what you're going to have is you're going to have a lot of people going to be looking for any form of fraud. And then, well, see, that's fraud, that's fraud. The stark reality of politics, stark reality of elections is, yeah, there are individual cases of fraud. It happens. But individual cases of fraud does not make a national conspiracy of fraud caused by a political party or a political presidential campaign. There are many reasons, outside of the main reason where there's no evidence, but there are many reasons why anyone could be skeptical about these claims of fraud. My main one, I actually have a few main ones, but my first main one is that we were telegraphed this. As I said, Trump said months ago, if I don't win, it was because of fraud. Weeks ago, if I don't win, because of fraud. Days ago, if I don't win, was fraud. The day of, if I don't win outright, fraud. Days after, I didn't win, so therefore it was fraud. There's that. And there's another reason, a basic logic reason. For the sake of this silly argument, if there happened to have been fraud to benefit Joe Biden to becoming president of the United States, why didn't it affect the other people on the same ballot? Why would there be a fraud to install someone into power while doing nothing about the down ballots? You know, if there was going to be a fraud, shouldn't that also make sure that the down ballots were also in line with it? Because at this stage, before the runoffs goes one way or the other, Joe Biden becomes president while the Republicans still control the Senate. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not a very good fraud if you're just going to give someone the presidency but then have them be paralyzed and being unable to make policy because of an obstructive Senate. That makes no sense. Plus, the Democrats lost House seats in this. They still maintain control, but nonetheless, they lost House seats. It doesn't make sense that there is a national fraud operation that does not also include the down ballot. Because that leaves no one an advantage. But there you go. Now, we start this, legal game, and so far, again, no one has seen any evidence of this. We're only seeing accusation. Money is being raised for Trump's legal efforts. The Republicans so far raised $60 million for his legal efforts. Lindsey Graham raised $500,000 for his legal efforts. And yet, Trump is using this money not for his legal efforts, to pay down his campaign debts. You are paying his bills. You're not paying for his legal efforts. Which, doesn't that sound like Trump? Need I remind you, my gentle snowflakes, that when, I believe in 2018, he did finally get some money for the border, for border security and to build a length of the border wall. This money was allocated for border security. Donald Trump only used 6% of it for that. Where did the rest of the money go? What else is there here? I mean, he keeps using other people's money for slush funds or for other endeavors that he actually is asking them to do. Now, I have my own theory and opinion on this, and this is not a very good one in terms of our country. Donald Trump is going to make these efforts in the court. They're half-hearted efforts. They're not going to have any really basis of any investigation or evidence. They're just going to be accusations that he's going to keep flying. He's going to keep throwing it out there. He will continue to go to Twitter. He's going to do his rallies where he's going to read off obituaries of people who have died who he says voted for Biden. One little point of contention on that. The one case that we did hear that someone tried to get a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot for a dead relative was a Trump supporter. So let's not pretend that the scourge of voter fraud is mutually exclusive to one party. He's going to do this. He's going to continue this from now to January. He will never concede. His ego will demand him not to. He doesn't want to look like a loser in front of his people. People are getting fired or threatened to get fired in the White House when they're starting to make their arrangements to look for another job. They don't want even an image of there being a transition, so they will outright fire them. Officials have already been fired over this. Majority of the leadership of the Republican Party has not congratulated Joe Biden for his win. They don't even want to acknowledge. They don't even want to acknowledge it. Now, the argument is, let the president have his time, have his day in court, and, he has every right. Yes, he has every right. He has every right to do that. Yes. But it still doesn't preclude you to ignore 279 electoral college votes and an overwhelming population majority. Some members of the Republican Party did congratulate him. Romney did. Susan Collins did. Former President George W. Bush did. But the majority don't want to even acknowledge this. They just want to acknowledge that either there was voter fraud or there should be an investigation on voter fraud. The DOJ under Barr is going to investigate this without substantial evidence of it. They're going to investigate it anyway. Fine. Do recounts in certain areas? Fine. But I tell you, the only example of national voter fraud or national election interference is this very act perpetrated by Trump and the Republicans, by his DOJ, for those who don't want to accept the reality of this. And Here's an interesting thing about that. As I've seen in my own social medias about this, about people who are so desperate to believe that there is election fraud. We're gonna take this down into a level that is understood by all. What is election fraud, election fraud, election fraud, other than it being a Republican version of Russia, Russia, Russia? You see, you all do like to dismiss the Russian interference in the 2016 election. Now, there is a good reason to do so, but there's a few bad reasons to do so. One good reason is Russian interference did occur, but it wasn't in conjunction with efforts with the Trump campaign, nor its interference affected the vote. It didn't affect voting machines. It didn't flip people's names. They interfered. They absolutely interfered. Our intelligence community said they interfered. They warned President Obama that they were interfering. And only this past year, the Republican-led Senate intelligence community confirmed that Russia interfered. So that did happen. But that did not happen in the numbers that would affect an election, and that did not happen in collusion with the Trump campaign. But it did happen. But a lot of people on the left do connect the dots on Trump in connection with it. Because there's a lot of questions that was always asked, why was Trump so beholden to Putin? Why was he always so flattering to Putin? Why, even when we were going to give Russia sanctions over the Russian interference, Trump signed it while kicking and screaming, apparently. Election fraud, election interference, could it be happening? It could be. Is there any evidence of it being a national conspiracy? Or one manufactured by the DNC or Biden? No. Is any of these instances of election fraud enough to tip the scales of the election that we have seen so far? No. Do people believe it anyway? Yeah, because the same person that is narrating this narration, Donald Trump, is still pushing it. He's going to push it in rallies. He's going to push it on Twitter. His sycophants are going to push it. Going on their favorite channels and continue to say it over and over and over again in a mantra, because that's how you develop a narrative, regardless of the narrative being reality or not. Un momento. Look up, you want up? You gonna up or you gonna bite? If I get you up, or you gonna bite? You do, you're going down. Okay? This little pop-up head. Smart. What's the matter with this puppy head? Man, yeah, they were going to absolutely believe it, because they're going to hear about it every day between now and January. None of these court cases so far has merit. None of these fraud accusations have survived being inside a courtroom long enough before a judge threw it out. When asked for evidence, they have none. So what is this all but a show? And that's the dangerous part here. Trump will do the efforts in the courts, but they'll be lackluster. They've already, in their first attempt at this, they messed up the first filings of paperwork, and so that got crushed. They're not doing anything proper by the numbers. It's almost like they're ensuring that there's going to be a failure. So then they can point to the failure and say, see, it's a deep state. He's a boy that cried fraud. But unfortunately, there's going to be 71 million people that will believe it because they believe every word he says. We think. I mean, sometimes you have to have the nuance to break down how many people are actually, who voted for Trump, who are really that pro-Trump, or they voted for Trump either because they don't want Biden to be in it, or they voted for Trump because they're Republican loyalists and they're just voting for the R, or whatever. The same thing, the flip side, 76 million people voted for Biden. Are all those people who voted for Biden people who were pro-Biden, who were like, thank God he finally got into the presidency after so many years? Or voted for Biden because he picked Kamala Harris as his VP for all the legit historical reasons why her being a VP is an amazing thing, other than, the other stuff that we all know about Kamala Harris, which makes us kind of flinch as to why she's the VP nom, but be that as it may. Or could it be the vast majority of people who voted for Biden, all 76 million people who voted for Biden, voted for him because they voted against Trump? I think that's a certainty. But Biden isn't pushing a conspiracy theory. Biden isn't saying anything here that isn't already a mathematical certainty. He has 279 electoral college votes. He has 76 million people who voted for him, in the majority, at least 4 or 5 million, over Trump. He is president-elect, even though the professional Republican politicians who fear the Trump fan base, who sycophantically will bow to him, even in defeat, will ignore this fact. But we will hear about this, no doubt, through this time of transition. If there's a time of transition, the Trump people don't even want to do a transition period. They want to wait until it's all certain. Certification of a lot of this stuff, a lot of these votes, is way down the line at the end of November. So this is a long, saturated period of us hearing about bullshit. Unless someone just flat out throws it out. But this is what we're probably going to hear for the next 2 or so months. And I dare say, we may still hear afterwards, depending on how much of an influence Trump will be on the Republican Party. Oh yeah, this will be your Russia, Russia, Russia. And like Russia, 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 there was no evidence of collusion between Trump and Russia. Election fraud, election fraud, election fraud, so far. There is no evidence of the Biden campaign or the DNC perpetrating a national effort of a national fraud. And again, it would make no sense to do so where it only affects Biden and not the down ballot. Why would Mitch McConnell be safe from a fraud? Why would Lindsey Graham, who was so neck and neck with his Democratic opponent, but peeled away at the end, why would he be spared from this vast left-wing conspiracy and fraud? I don't know. People want to say it would make it less obvious. No. The weird thing about that is that, remember, Democrats were expecting a blue wave. So far, 76 million people voted. The majority of those probably were expecting a clean sweep of this. Because how annoyed and angry what a Trump presidency has caused in people, and the same type of anger should have fallen onto his sycophantic political underlings in the Senate and in the House. Those who buy his bullshit and promote his bullshit. If a fraud did occur, and the fraud also attached to them, people would believe it, because they would believe that was part of the blue wave. But it didn't happen. See? Now, the Occam's razor of this is that, all else being equal, the obvious answer is obvious. The obvious answer is Joe Biden, through the sheer force of the mail-in vote and early voting, which was 100 million strong in the majority, won this election, allowed him to win Pennsylvania, which clinched it. It will ultimately, I believe, allow him to win Arizona, may even win Georgia, even when we're going to have a recount on that. But recounts, the shave back and forth is only a couple hundred to a couple thousand. This is over 10,000. Biden may end up with 306 electoral college votes, 76 million people and counting. That is the will of the people. That is not party machinations. That is not voter machines jerking one way or to another at a magnificent level in order to turn a state election. That is the will of the people. The will of a people that does not want Trump to have a second term, that voted for it righteously. Now, will I be surprised if Trump somehow gets his argument in front of the right judge and then cause a chaos moment in this that maybe threatens this election result? I won't be surprised. Keep in mind, last 4 years, they have put up a lot of federal judges. Again, the likelihood of that is so small. Because no matter what political ideology the judge has been, they put forward these fraud cases in front of them so far from the campaign on up, they have thrown them aside. They've thrown aside all the arguments of mail-in voting. They threw aside all these arguments upon voter fraud after the fact, when there were no evidence of it. Threw aside the argument that their people weren't there to watch. None of our people were there to watch. When even a Fox News correspondent on the ground, when mentioned that's called bullshit, that it's not true, it's not true, it's not true. For in these voting rooms, there are two segregated spots, where the Democratic observers and the Republican observers, they are in there. So that's a lie. No farther away now than any other election. That's a lie. Now, on my social media, on the group that I admin, Middle America, founded by Vin and Sori, I always plug them because they're awesome people. Check them out on YouTube. They do music reviews, and Vin does Middle America, a political. His videos on politics, which is all very good, very thorough. One of the things I like about Vin is that he will go into extreme detail to prove his point. Now, I don't always agree with him. He certainly doesn't agree with me. But we're friends, and it's cool. We don't have to agree. But it is worth the watch. Right? But on my Middle America group that he founded, I have made it a point, and me and the other admins made it a point to, after this election was called, to give a week's grace. To not gloat. To not make anyone feel bad for the results of this election. And we tried. We're going to. We are. For 1 week. From last Sunday, which I laid down the timeline. Last Sunday, midnight, to this coming Sunday, midnight, a moratorium, a week of grace, friendship, family. 12:01, next Sunday, that ends. Now, none of this argument about election fraud applies to that, because that's not really gloating. That's just dealing with the bullshit that is at hand. But once 12:01 comes, and certain people who thought that Trump was going to win this by a landslide will be reminded of it. Severely. Now, one of the things for me with this election, why I've been so calm about this, was people have been commenting on my calmness. Because yeah, I am a ranter, and I am passionate with my politics, and when I see bullshit, I call bullshit. But why I was so calm in this election was because the feeling of inevitability, knowing that turnout always bends to the Democrats. That's why you hear Republicans time and time again, election after election, trying to suppress the vote, trying to draw down turnout, trying to depress the vote, making sure certain demographics don't vote as easy as other demographics. That is not the case here. I would love to see at the final end what the figure was of how many people turned out to vote. But suffice it to say, if there is 320 million people that resides in the United States, 160 of them voted, at least. That's amazing. Big turnout goes the way of the Democrats, usually. And big turnout here doesn't have to mean that they are so enthusiastic about Joe Biden. They are just enthusiastic to vote out Donald Trump. Now, as I said, there is kind of a dangerous period here. All of Trump's machinations here that more than likely will crash and burn in the court. They succeed. We'll give it the small chance, but more than likely doesn't. That might not be the point, because like this could be a perpetual of Russia, Russia, Russia on the Republican side. You don't need evidence. You just need the accusation. You just need the question. Because perception is reality. And if you try to push this narrative in a mantra, and obviously your people believe whatever you say, this could be a very dangerous period. This could be something that can harm Americans, and not just metaphysically, but harm them, their lives. Because we have already seen that Trump, through his loose-lip rhetoric, his recklessness, has inspired people. I have said this numerous times, and let me again do so again. Through his incitement, direct or indirect, intentional or not, had two of his fans, during the 2016 campaign, beat down and urinate on a homeless man because They said he was illegal. He inspired them to do that. And his words about that is that, well, they were just being too patriotic. A super van who had that ridiculous truck with Trump's shit all over it, who you would have seen the pictures of him at these rallies, was attempting to mail bombs to Democratic rivals of the president, political rivals, and got caught with it. Coast Guard lieutenant was stockpiling weapons, performance-enhancing drugs, in order for him to do the task of mass murder, and had an enemy list of Trump's political rivals and media critics that he was going to kill in the name of Trump. Patrick, in El Paso, he drove 9 hours from home to get to El Paso so he can kill invaders. From his manifesto, that sounded an awful lot like the rhetoric Trump gave on immigrants, migrants, asylum seekers, who are illegals. If that gets inspired during a time when Trump is on top, where there was no fear of him falling in an election at those times, how many of his people are going to listen to these dog whistles and bullhorns about, it's not fair that I've been cheated, the country is getting cheated? How many of them will get it into their heads that they're going to have to go out themselves, pick up a weapon, pick up a cachet of weapons, and they're going to go out in the name of their leader, make America great again? How many? Because no matter how ardent of a Trump supporter you are and may think this is far-fetched, you know in your heart there at least is going to be one that's going to do this. And he's fanning the flames of this. He is keeping his people revved up. He's going to do it every single day till January. And I dare say, even after January. Through him, through his sycophants, online, on Fox News, or on OAN. Because, I don't know how much, outside of the Fox News personalities, the news people are not giving him, is not buying his shit anymore. Better late than never, right? Once this is all over, and at least Georgia is put in, and Arizona's put in, and there's more or less of a doubt, I will make another video which will express my exaltation at the ending of this era. Because yeah, I have a laundry list of things I'm grateful that will no longer be a part of our leadership anymore. While Donald Trump is extending the height and size of the wall he already put up a week ago for fear of election rioting. Gee, I wonder why he's barricading himself in the White House. How is he going to get his McDonald's? Is that going to be airdropped from Marine 2? Or is that maybe perhaps when the feds come in January to evict him? Because, walls, he just loves the medieval idea of walls, where, people can just use helicopters and we'll airdrop it. Oh, that's fine. But when this is all said and done, I will make an exaltated video on this. But until then, the ranter rants, because the urge to rant is rising. And Biden won, y'all. See you later.